Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Dating the Intern by Natalina Reis, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Stardom Bound. This should never have happened. Of all the stupid things fate could have come up with, this one topped the cake. I stood there, phone halfway between my ear and the table, stunned out of the ability to move or speak. What the hell had just happened? I had never aspired to fame, being more than satisfied with a successful yet subdued life, perfectly happy blending in with the background, invisible in a crowd. Now fame was seeking me out. It was freaking beckoning to me, and I, like a brainless butterfly, was answering its call. When the phone rang, the number on the screen meant nothing to me. I contemplated not answering, but I did, afraid it was another entrepreneur interested in sponsoring or supporting my business. It wasn't. "Ms. Tower, we have heard so many good things about your agency," a strange voice claiming to be a certain Mr. Robertson, head of programming for a local network channel, said in a sticky voice I instantly disliked. "We would love to feature you in a news spot next month." What? Why would anyone want to feature me in my online dating site? "We spotlight local businesses every week to show our support. Yours is very successful. We checked out your stats and were impressed by the rate of success you have with your love matches." The words sounded genuine, but the tone didn't. There was a creepy quality to the man's voice that made me cringe. 90% success rate is unheard of in this kind of business. Kudos. I coughed up a thank you, but not too sure I understood what he was saying. I did have an amazing success rate in matching my customers with life partners, most of which ended in marriage. The secret was not so much in a complicated algorithm, but rather in personal advice and interaction between me, some of my employees, and the customers. At the Ivory Tower Agency, we worked extra hard to make sure our clients got their happily ever after. I had a team of people specially trained to ferret out the fire doors, the benchers, and the cushioners. People who used our services to mislead others were swiftly dealt with and removed from the system, which in turn made our serious customers, those who were truly looking for the love of their lives, feel safe and happy. "With springtime upon us, we would love to feature you and some of your customers in a special called Spring into Love," the slimy man continued. "We will not pay you for your trouble, but the exposure you'll get is priceless." I could use some free advertising. Even though we were doing well on the whole, our profit margin was pretty narrow, and I often struggled to make ends meet. For the kind of services we offered, I needed lots of hands on deck, which cost money. I started employing interns willing to be paid a nominal salary in exchange for the on-the-job experience, but with the business growing as it was, the need for more employees had also grown. I was tempted. What exactly would it entail? I asked, my red alert run for the hills alarm fighting with the wish to get some free publicity. "Nothing much." Why did he sound as if he meant the opposite? "A couple of interviews with you, an employee or two, and a few customers. Then we will have you make a live appearance on the news." I sucked in a breath. The idea of being on live TV? Too terrifying to contemplate. "It will be a very low key at an ungodly hour of the morning when very few people will be watching." Was he trying to encourage me to do it, or the opposite? How would an appearance on a show no one would watch help my business? He seemed to have read my mind. "It will be replayed later in the day during prime time, so anything that goes wrong can be edited out before airing the second time. You will get great exposure." Needless to say, I said yes. Not even 5 minutes later, the magnitude of what I had just done hit me like a hammer on a nail. Holy shit! I just committed to be on live TV. Me, who couldn't even stand to look at pictures of myself without wanting to crawl into a giant hole in the ground. The strident screech of my doorbell snapped me out of my paralysis. I really have to change that stupid bell. I set the phone down on my cocktail table and strode to the door, rising on my tiptoes to look through the peephole. It was Amber Lee, my best friend and general manager, who had been with me from the very beginning of my venture into the online dating business. Unlocking the door, I opened it to allow my friend to mosey on inside, her usual lazy smile stretched across her lips. "I heard," she said, throwing her tiny purse onto the couch and setting both hands on her wide hips. "It's about time you step out of your comfort zone." I closed the door and ignored her, stepping away and throwing myself nonchalantly after her purse onto the soft, overstuffed sofa. "No big deal." My words belayed the tightness in my gut, the hand of anxiety closing around my stomach. "It's an early, short appearance. I won't even have to talk much at all." Or so Robertson claimed. "I just have to sit, smile, and look pretty." I could do the sitting and the smiling, but I wasn't sure about the looking pretty part. I was certainly no beauty with my 5'3" height, plain brown hair and eyes, and freckled face. At most, I could pass for an ordinary-looking woman with average looks. Amber Lee's burst of laughter made me want to throttle her, but I reminded myself she was my BFF and that life would be pretty bleak without her by my side. "Don't give me that fucking crap. You're terrified and you know it." The thought tugging at my mind since she walked in finally coalesced into something I could make sense of. "Wait, how do you know? I just now talked to Robertson." I narrowed my eyes at her as she made herself comfortable beside me. Her sky-blue eyes twinkled with mischief. "I have a friend at the TV station who told me he was going to call you." I opened my mouth to ask her something else, but she cut me off. "How did I know you accepted it? You may be chicken when it comes to being the center of attention, but you are a good businesswoman, and I knew you would never pass on a chance like this." She knew me too well. "So close that gaping mouth of yours and fill me in on all the dirty details." We spent the next hour or so talking over what the creepy TV guy told me while stuffing our faces with the heavenly dark chocolates a client had brought me from Belgium a week ago. It was always easy to talk to Amber Lee, who was painfully honest sometimes, but also deeply compassionate. She kept me real when I tended to lose myself in flights of fantasy. "How did the date with Ben go the other day?" I was afraid she would ask about that. Things had not gone well. During our date at a fancy restaurant, I spaced out after the first 10 minutes of conversation about how well his favorite hockey team was doing and planned out a whole new marketing strategy for our company in my head. Needless to say, he noticed I wasn't into him when I answered all his questions with a non-committal uh-huh and a nod of the head. But to give him due credit, he didn't catch on until the end of the date. I guess he mistook my dreamy expression for interest. "We won't be going out again," I said as quickly as I could, hoping she wouldn't notice. She pinched her lips and opened her eyes so wide I thought they would pop out of their sockets. "Don't be mad. All he wanted to talk about was hockey. We would bore each other to death within the first couple dates." "You're too freaking picky for your own good. You will never find a man that way." Wasn't that interested in finding a man, or at least not for the sake of dating. At heart, I was a true romantic, still believing there was one person perfect for everyone. I just hadn't found mine yet. "You dish out all this romance advice to your customers when in fact you have no idea what you're talking about. How long has it been since you dated?" "Not that long." My most recent boyfriend had been long gone since his breakup text 6 months ago. At that time, I hadn't seen him in almost 2 months while he traveled in Northern Europe getting high and laid every chance he got. "I'm too busy for guys." Amber Lee huffed and folded her arms over her generous breasts. "You're full of shit. You need to follow your own advice and put yourself out there." Not much chance of that. I was a homebody who hated to make small talk and got tongue-tied when speaking to people I didn't know well. Talking to clients was different. There was a conversation map, so to speak. We were quiet for a moment. She folded her arms and sighed. "All right, I won't fight with you anymore. Espresso?" I nodded, and she stood up to go brew us some coffee. I hugged a cushion, my chin resting on the edge. I was lonely, but resigned to spending the rest of my life flying solo. I always admired and envied other women who seemed so at ease in social situations, with just the right thing to say hanging on the tip of their tongues at all times. I was the one who hid in a corner, glass of non-alcoholic beverage in hand, wishing someone would come to engage me in conversation with the same ferocity as wishing everyone would leave me be. I was a pain in my own ass, so how could I expect others to think otherwise? My friend returned from the kitchen, or coffee heaven, as I like to call it, with the tiny cups in her hand. Guess who just won a literary award this week? I stretched my hand to take my coffee from her. J.K. Rowling? Yes, I was a huge fan of everything Harry Potter. The coffee smelled heavenly, so I took a long sniff. Your intern. I looked up from the coffee, raising my eyebrows. Lee Kwang. That boy is amazing. Lee Kwang started working for me a couple months back. The man had an incredible resume for someone that young. Only 27, he already had a master's in business, 2 published novels, and now a prestigious award, it seemed. Wow, not sure whether to be impressed or jealous. I couldn't understand why he would want to work as an intern in a company like ours, but I was not about to turn down a good deal, not to mention that he was very easy on the eyes. Amber Lee sat next to me again, twitching her nose like Samantha from Bewitched. He's handsome and brilliant, she said in a tone that suggested a hidden meaning. She wiggled her eyebrows at me, and I furrowed mine, totally confused. She sighed loudly. Oh, you're so thick, girl. I was trying to imply that you should go for him. My jaw dropped, and I choked on my espresso. What the hell, Lily? I'm not that desperate for a date. I put my coffee down and threw a pillow at her. She laughed. Right, because it would be such a sacrifice to date a young, hot, brilliant guy. Just because it was true didn't make it right. I don't know how you'd bear it. I humped and made a face at her. He's almost 10 years younger than me and would never in a million years even consider dating little old me. Not that I'd want it. I was perfectly happy being single. So you're telling me you haven't noticed how beautiful Lee Kwang is? Of course I'd noticed. The man was... I didn't have words to describe him. He was tall, a couple inches over 6 feet at least, and had the most kissable lips I had ever seen on a guy, full and perfectly shaped. I'm not going to lie, I may have daydreamed about kissing him once or twice. I've had a few wet dreams about him. Heat rose to my face so quickly I didn't have time to hide it. Damn you, Amber Lee. Leave it to you to make me feel like a teenager again. She smirked, satisfied with the reaction she snagged from me. You're evil, my friend. Yes, I've noticed this hotness, but he's super young and my underling. As soon as I said it, I cringed at my choice of words. Underling? Who says that? I had fallen straight into her trap. Damn it, she chuckled. This is why dating a younger guy would do you good. You need to catch up with the times, woman. She might have a point there, however small, but I wasn't going to date anyone, Lee Kwang or anyone else, just because I was lonely. Wait, shit, I was lonely. I hated when others knew more about me than myself. They probably pitied me, the successful 36-year-old woman with no one to love. How embarrassing. Thanks to my meddling friend, I couldn't stop stealing glances at Lee Kwang from behind the large window that separated my small office from the rest of the space. I found myself wandering over to the glass half wall and watching him from behind my lashes, all the while pretending I was reading. At one point, Amber Lee stuck her head around through the gap in the doorway to warn me the book in my hands was upside down. She laughed and I blushed. Nothing new there. Boss, you have a visitor. Marianne, a perky young woman who had been working for me for almost a year, squinted at me from the open door. Should I let her in? I was deep into a customer's profile. I raised my hand and blinked a few times before her words sank in. Who could that possibly be? No one ever visited the office. Even the customers met with us elsewhere. Who is it? Curiosity bloomed inside me. Someone from the local news channel? She said, still squinting. Where were her glasses? Teresa something or other? I really should train my staff on how to take messages. Maybe it was time for me to get a secretary. I closed my laptop and nodded. Bring her in. My employee turned around to leave. Oh, Marianne, can you bring a water bottle and a glass for the visitor? Marianne looked at me as if I'd grown 2 heads. I really needed to train my staff in public relations. I made a mental note to talk to them about this at our next staff meeting. Seconds later, a tall, gorgeous woman walked in my office. She had to be a model, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed in a dress that hugged every inch of her sexy curves. Was she even real? Her lips stretched into a friendly smile. Sorry to barge in like this, she said, offering a limp hand for a shake. I was going to call, but I thought face-to-face would be so much more personal. As long as I didn't have to chit-chat, I was okay with it. What can I do to help you? I pointed toward the 2 comfy stuffed chairs at the corner of my office. She sat down just as Mary Ann, still squinting, walked in with the water. Can I offer you coffee or tea? She shook her head. Thank you, but water is fine. I took the seat at the next chair, folded my hands on my lap, waiting. Mary Ann set the water down on the small table between the 2 chairs and left, but not before giving me a look that said, Who is this doll? I almost laughed. You must be wondering why I'm here. The little flame of curiosity had turned into a full tundra fire. I work for programming at the TV station, and Mr. Robertson put me in charge of the details for the Spring into Love spot. We have received the signed contract. Thank you very much for being so prompt. I had to be, otherwise I'd forget. That was a strategy I learned as a kid. Do what you have to do right away before your brain puts it in a dark, forgotten room in your mind. Was there a problem with it? It was a pretty standard no-frills legal document that made my agreement to be featured on their news official. She laughed softly. No problem. I just want to go over some of the specifics. We have your professional bio, but we need something a bit more personal. I startled a bit at that. How was my personal life of any interest? The public loves to feel as if they have an inside look into your life. Don't worry. We don't have to give them anything terribly private, but it will help if it's something that is directly connected to your job. In your case, the matchmaking services. I was confused, and I was sure it showed because she tilted her head as if assessing whether I was fooling around or just plain stupid. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what kind of information you're looking for. Your love life. What? What was she talking about? You're the CEO of a successful matchmaking company who stands out from others because of the personal interaction with your clients, the advice you give them. You have a special insight into the world of dating and romantic relationships, which is what makes your services so successful. I was still confused, and I furrowed my eyebrows in response. In other words, we need information about your love life. We'd love to meet and interview your SO. What fresh kind of hell was this? You want me to do what? I was so shell-shocked I forgot to hide my surprise. She raised her hands in a reassuring gesture. Don't panic. It won't be anything too personal. Just a matter of bringing your boyfriend along. I'm assuming you're not married. And answering some simple questions about your own relationship. What kind of questions? What I should be asking was, what boyfriend? But I was too stunned to think straight. You know, where did you meet? How did you know he was the one? Are you planning a wedding soon? Simple stuff. Simple enough for someone with an actual boyfriend. What if I don't have an SO? Which I didn't. That would look really bad for you and your company, Teresa said, her lips cutting a small smile again. How can someone without a romantic relationship dish out advice on it? You would lose the trust of your clientele. She gave me a sideways glance. You're just being coy, right? You do have a fiancé, or at least a boyfriend? Oh, you have no idea how much I'm not bullshitting you. I swallowed the large knot in my throat and discreetly wiped a few beads of sweat collecting on my forehead. Of course I have a boyfriend. I forced a smile that probably looked more like a frown. I just don't like to air out my private life in public. She slapped her own thighs. Perfect. Everyone will be curious about your own romance, so we'll give them a slice of it. Perfect. Far from it. Not perfect at all. And I was stuck between a non-existent boyfriend and a legal contract that may mean a much-needed boom in business. What the hell had I just got myself into? Ms. Tower. It was a disembodied voice, and for a moment I wondered whether our office was haunted. That was until I realized I'd been covering my head, sandwiching it between the hard top of my desk and the muffling softness of a large cushion. I loosened my hold on the pillow and pulled it aside, slowly adjusting my eyes to the brightness of the room. Ms. Tower. My eyes first met a pair of jeans hanging low on a male's narrow hips, and then followed the whiteness of his shirt, stretched taut over his chest and all the way up to his beautiful face. God, he was gorgeous. For a moment or two I pondered on my impulse to wrap my hands around his waist and pull him against me. Then I realized who I was lusting over in my office, and that was my messy bun had somehow turned into a rat's nest while hiding underneath the pillow. I hastily brushed my hair with my fingers, undoubtedly making it look even worse, and jumped to my feet, hoping to God I didn't have spit dripping from the corner of my mouth. Yes. It was a croak rather than a word. I cleared my throat, heat burning my cheeks. What's the problem? Lee Kwang's luscious lips stretched into a lazy smile. Sorry to wake you from your nap, he said, hiding a chuckle behind his hand. I smoothed out possible crinkles on my blue dress and licked my lips. I wasn't sleeping, I protested louder than the situation warranted. I was meditating. My yoga teacher told me to do that a few times during the workday. Not a total lie. My instructor did say that to me, but I was obviously just having a shut-eye to block my problems away. When everything else failed, I tried to ignore it. My lifelong fail-proof strategy wasn't working this time. You look stressed, he said, with what sounded like genuine concern in his voice. Is everything okay? Can I help with anything? I didn't know if it was the look he gave me, the fact that I had indeed kind of just woken up from a weird dream, or the whole non-existent boyfriend fiasco. But I lost it. I burst out crying. Not just crying, ugly crying. Thankfully, I hadn't gone crazy with the mascara that morning, or the raccoons would have nothing on me. The poor intern looked as lost as I was out of control, his hands hovering close to my shoulders and arms, but not actually touching. His lips were pressed so close together they had lost all sense of shape. If I hadn't been so hysterical, I would have felt sorry for him. As it was, I couldn't stop feeling sorry for myself, and in the back of my mind I knew I would be mortified later, but all I needed at that moment was a strong shoulder to cry on, and his was the only one available. Much to his dismay, I'm sure. I dropped my head to his chest, as close as I could get to his shoulders, and allowed the waterworks to continue. The tears fell for a long time, punctuated ever so often by little sobs that I couldn't hold in. I lost track of time and my dignity as I stood there leaning on a man I barely knew and who was my subordinate, worse yet, who was much younger than me. As soon as the tears finally dried out, I became acutely aware of his hard pecs underneath my face and the awful snotty stains on his immaculate shirt. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I said in a panic, trying to brush the dark spots with my hands. Holy Mother of God, it looked as if I was caressing him. I pulled my hands away, horrified. Double sorry. I don't know what got into me. So sorry. Scared of looking at his face, I stared straight at the ugly blotches on the white of his shirt. I'll buy you a new shirt. How unprofessional of me. Before I knew what was happening, he held onto my hands. His were large and warm. I had the insane thought that my tiny puny hands belonged in his. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I looked up at him. Stop fussing. It's okay. He bent his head just enough to look at me in the eyes. Everyone has bad days. I'm glad I was here when you needed a good cry. I sniffed like a little girl. But your shirt, I made a mess out of it. I was glad he was holding my hands because I would have touched him again. I'd taken a total leave of my senses. There's mascara all over it. He clicked his tongue in an oddly old-fashioned way. Nothing that won't wash out. Will you stop worrying about my shirt and tell me what's going on? I shouldn't. I really shouldn't confide in him, but he would be gone in a few months once his internship was over, and I'd most likely never see him again. Who better to vent out my frustration about this whole mess? So I did. He led me to the comfy couch and never once let go of my hands while I spilled out the whole silly and embarrassing story about the TV show and a boyfriend that didn't exist. And at the time I didn't think anything of it, but later it hit me how gentle and sympathetic he was, listening to my torrent of complaints, whining, really, without interrupting other than offering the occasional nod. So you see, I concluded, feeling surprisingly better, in a nutshell, I'm screwed. I hung my head heavy with the realization I was in a seriously tight spot. Lee Kwang was quiet for a moment, and I didn't dare look at him, afraid of what I might read in his lovely eyes. When he squeezed my hands tighter, I almost jumped off my seat. It's not as bad as you think, he said, and my chin jerked up. What did he mean exactly? I have a plan if you're willing to hear me out. A plan. Of course I wanted to hear him out. A plan was better than what I had, which was nothing, zip, nada. I nodded frantically. You do? What is it? Don't freak out, okay? He locked those awesome peepers with mine before continuing. What if I pose as your boyfriend? Good thing I was seated or I would have fallen on my ass. What was he saying? Was I hallucinating, or had he just offered himself as a sacrificial lamb? A beautiful, young, and smart one. What did you say? My voice went down a couple octaves. My mouth was as dry as a raisin left out in the sun for a while. You posing as my what? A smile bloomed on his lips. Your boyfriend, he repeated as if that made more sense the second time around. I will pretend I'm your SO and we'll play act for the world. Problem solved. I coughed and he offered me a sip from the bottle he'd brought in with him. That's insane, I managed to squeak out. Not fair to you and pretty risky for everyone involved. I mean, I don't even know you other than your name and that you've won a book award. I looked up at him in an attempt to smile. Congrats on that, by the way. I'm impressed. He shrugged it away. No big deal. Yes, of course it was a big deal, but I let it go for now. His proposal was still ringing in my head. We still have a few weeks to get to know each other. We can practice so that we look and sound genuine. His smile was contagious. My lips stretched into what I was sure was a ridiculous grin. Well, do we have a deal? My head moved of its own accord to agree with his insane idea. It looked as if I had just dug myself even deeper into that dark hole. The silver lining was I got to play girlfriend to that handsome man. This could turn out to be a total disaster. So why was I smiling from ear to ear?